What if I told you that in 2007, two Cunard ships brought the city of Sydney to a standstill? Would you believe me? It sounds a little bit far-fetched, but it actually happened. I'm Chris Frame, the Maritime historian, and this is one of my favourite ocean liner memories. And if you were in Sydney on the 20th of February 2007, I'm sure that it's a day that you still remember. It was a remarkable sight. So let's have a look at the day that Cunard broke Sydney. In 2007, something interesting happened. Cunard sent two of their queens on world cruises, and both arrived in Sydney on the very same day. This made for a remarkable event, and one that brought the city to a standstill. But first, a little bit of context. Sydney has a long history with the Cunard Queens. In fact, it dates back to World War II. During the war, both the original Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth were sent to Sydney for their wartime service. The Queen Mary was actually given a refurbishment in Sydney to convert her into a troop ship undertaken by the Cockatoo dry dock workers. The Queen Elizabeth was retrofitted in Singapore, but was given a refit in Sydney before she started taking on troops, and both ships would operate convoy services to the Middle East. This created a lot of attention back in the 1940s, and the two ships had a unique moment when they rendezvoused as the Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth were coming and going from the harbour. This created a great deal of interest with locals. You see, in Australia, having these two giant transatlantic liners in Sydney Harbour was quite a spectacle. Nothing this size had ever been seen before. Fast forward to 2007, and two Cunard Queens had not been in Sydney together since World War II. The QE2 had visited regularly during her world cruises, and had often rendezvoused with the smaller Sagafjord whilst the two ships were on their respective voyages. But it had never been a case since World War II that two Cunard Queens had been together in the harbour city. In the lead up to that unique day, Cunard and the city of Sydney had been working together to promote the event, billed as the first time that you could see two Cunard Queens together in the harbour since World War II. Obviously, it had gained a lot of public interest. Newspapers reported that this event was going to happen, so there was great general awareness across the city. It also coincided with Queen Mary II's maiden visit to the harbour, so there were already elevated levels of interest and excitement. For the QE2, this would become her penultimate visit to the city, although at the time no one knew the ship would soon be retired. However, QE2 was incredibly famous at this time, and everybody knew what the QE2 was. She'd been visiting Sydney since the 1970s, and most people in the harbour were very aware of the ship's profile. So already it was an event that was likely going to have quite a lot of interest. But no one had really realised just how much public interest there would be. On 20 February 2007, the Queen Mary II sailed into the harbour in the early morning. It was her maiden visit to the city, and she was on her first world cruise. I was very fortunate to be there, on board the ship, standing on the deck as we made our way into the harbour. She was under the command of Commodore Christopher Rind, and as QM2 sailed in, she did a circular around Fort Denison and then berthed at the naval base in Woolloomooloo. QM2 stayed there for the day, and people were out on boats and walking around to have a look at the ship as she towered above the naval base. She was berthed a little bit out of the way, so it wasn't quite as prominent as her current location when she visits at Circular Quay, but there was a great deal of interest on the harbour. As the day progressed, more and more crowds started to line the banks, and by the late afternoon, things were getting very crowded, and there was a great atmosphere building up around the harbour. I had left the Queen Mary II that day and found a position to watch what was going to happen next from the Sydney Opera House, which I think was a pretty remarkable place to see this amazing event. The big event in question was that, of course, QE2 was going to arrive and sail past the Queen Mary II. QE2 made an uncharacteristically late afternoon arrival, which had all been orchestrated for this particular moment. Usually the ship would arrive in the morning, but they brought her in the afternoon so she could sail past the Queen Mary II during daylight. As the QE2 was making her way into the harbour, coming up through the heads and then into sight, something remarkable happened. People started appearing out of nowhere. There were hundreds and thousands of people swarming into the harbour from the city itself. People were leaving their office buildings, people had come in on the train, people were taking the ferries in to see this royal rendezvous, this remarkable moment in history. The banks of the harbour became incredibly crowded. There were people everywhere, people cheering and lots of people trying to get photographs. There were helicopters overhead and hundreds of boats throughout the harbour, people on chartered ferries, and even people on the regular Sydney ferry service as well. And of course, being 2007, everyone was taking photographs with flash cameras, so you could see flashes of light everywhere. It was a remarkable thing to see this harbour just flooded with boats as the QE2 made her way in. She sailed past the Queen Mary 2 and the two ships exchanged whistle blasts. There was a huge cheer from the crowd, and I only wish that HD video recordings had been available back then, because to try and capture this moment would have been absolutely remarkable. But the two ships were seen together, and it was a momentous occasion. The QE2 then made her way towards Circular Quay to berth at the Overseas Passenger Terminal. As she did, the boats came in behind her and completely blocked the harbour, which meant that the Sydney ferry service, which many people rely on to get home from work, could not operate effectively. There was this remarkable experience where you have two ships drawing in hundreds of thousands of people who lined the banks of the city, and in fact some estimates put it upwards of 1 million people who came in to see the two ships in the harbour. And then of course there were the poor people who were just trying to get home from work who couldn't do so because the ferries couldn't operate as the harbour was so crowded. Now with QE2 docked and Queen Mary 2 not due to leave until midnight, many people wanted to go home. But the flood of people going to the trains and to the taxis and to the cars meant that the whole city descended into gridlock. Remarkably, some people were unable to get home for upwards of hours due to the traffic jam and the delays on the trains. At this time, I was working for a company that was based in Sydney, and a lot of my colleagues knew that I had a passion for maritime history and that these two particular ships were very important to me. So I was getting text messages on my old Nokia phone saying, "I can't get home because of your ships blocking the harbour." It really was something that I think most people who lived in Sydney who were there at the time will never ever forget. That evening, late after the sun had gone down, the Queen Mary 2 departed and continued on her world cruise. To mark the occasion, there was a spectacular fireworks display with the two ships in the harbour together. The following day, the QE2 was alongside, and the water taxis that had been doing tours of both ships were continuing their tours of QE2. And although the Queen Mary 2 is a beautiful ship, and a very big ship at that, this sign with "the big one's gone but the pretty one remains" always makes me smile, because the QE2 was just such a picture-perfect ship. I mean, her profile was just beautiful, and everyone in Sydney knew it. This video was brought to you by me and my new book, The Evolution of the Passenger Ship. In The Evolution of the Passenger Ship, we bring years of research together to create a book that takes you on a journey from the dawn of passenger shipping right the way through to the modern cruise behemoths that we see today. And if you purchase a copy, you support us, which helps us keep the channel going. Thanks so much, and now back to the video. This event was repeated the following year when the QE2 made her last ever call to Sydney, but this time she rendezvoused with the smaller Queen Victoria. It also attracted big crowds, but nothing quite like what we'd seen in 2007. And of course, Cunard has done many more Royal Rendezvous since. So that is the true story of how Cunard broke Sydney. It's an interesting little moment in history, and one that if you were in the area you'll definitely remember for your lifetime. This was the first time that I can think of in Australia where thousands and thousands of people en masse gathered to celebrate two remarkable ocean liners, and the heritage that they continue on today, thanks to Cunard's service in World War II. I hope you enjoyed this little walk down memory lane, and thanks so much for watching. I hope you found the video interesting. A huge thank you as always to our fantastic channel members. Your support is what makes these videos possible. You can join the crew and see your name appear on future videos by following the link in the description below. For even more interesting maritime history articles, don't forget to check out my Substack, full of exclusive stories. And until next time, I hope to see you on board.